Today on the podcast, one of the most creatively innovative artists I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and just a great all-around guy, Dan Davidson. Dan, thanks for being on.
Hey man, yeah, thanks for having me. This is my first official podcast appearance, I think. I think it's the first time I've ever been on one.
You look very official with that microphone and the
I got
headphones and everything. So I
it's
would
all
say
for the
you look
look.
like a veteran.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
could have just pretended you were. I wouldn't have known the difference.
it's my fourth podcast of the morning here. Glad I could pencil you in.
I'm glad you could join me with all seriousness. Let's talk a little bit about how well you've been able to adapt through the pandemic, particularly about the Dieselbird Music Festival, which took off, became very popular right out of the gate. It was really the first festival of its kind, especially in Canada, or at least in the Canadian country music scene. But tell us a little bit about the impetus for that idea of rolling out a digital music festival, and how you put it together in such short order.
Yeah, we had to move so quick. It was, like I think the shutdown was originally something like March 13th or something. And yeah, in within a couple weeks, I felt like a lot of us artists and music fans were getting super saturated with the people in their living room sitting with an acoustic guitar, those kind of performances. And those are great too, because fans want to see the personality of their favorite artists and everything like that. But I just figured that there's got to be a way to do it a little bit bigger and a little bit more pointed. And so Travis Nesbitt, the guy I work with on everything for videos and branding and kind of creative ideas, is a bit of a partner in the Dan Davidson sort of brand, I guess. We had a call and we were just talking about how we could put together some sort of a digital music festival that had a vibe and had a brand. And yeah, so we came up with this concept roughly as it was the day that I'd canceled my trip to Mexico. We were on our way to the airport and got the word, and we're like, better set a good example. I turned the car around, and it was a tough day. So I was glad we were able to get creative out of it. But
Were you literally in the car on the way
yeah,
to
like
Mexico?
we were literally packed, and we were just packing up, and
Or to the
yeah,
airport, obviously, to fly to Mexico?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a long drive, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that was a real bummer, and it definitely set the pace for things. So I think a big part of the Dieselbird show was just trying to get our brains set for how it was going to be for the next year or foreseeable future. But essentially, when the idea was together with Travis, we started to think about how we could pull this off, and already Travis and I had been talking with Chuck Ehrman, who used to run the CRE out there in Camrose, the grounds where Big Valley goes on, as you know. We had already sort of been planning this festival idea that we had called Dieselbird, and it was basically just like an alternative lifestyle type festival. It was going to be more tattoos and subculture and punk rock and craft beer and all these kinds of things coming together, mixing some worlds a little bit. But we loved the concept of that, the edginess of it, and the thinking outside the box style that we'd kind of come up with for that. And we loved the name. And when this festival came up, we're like, oh, maybe we can just throw that name at it and just sort of build a brand around that, because this is a different thing that people haven't really done. And I think that's sort of a big part of what Travis and I wanted to do is to come up with some things that hadn't been done before, always be the first to the party. And that became sort of the Dieselbird MO. So the planning, it's so funny the way these things go. I'm sure it's sort of related to if you were trying to get something off the ground as far as a show in a really weird way. But I felt like I had to like sort of edge my way up. Like I'd get my friends, artists that were my friends on board, like Andrew Hyatt and Nice Horse. And then from there I could be like, well, Andrew Hyatt and Nice Horse are doing the show. Do you want to play this show? And then
Right.
artists started, it started slowly when I started getting people interested in it. But,
You sort of build the credibility bubble, one artist at a time, right? And then you can parlay off that credibility to procure another artist.
exactly. And, it was so crazy because like after 3 days of calling all my friends and everybody I knew, all of a sudden we had labels calling us asking if they could slot, like major labels calling us asking if they could slot some time for their artist or whoever. And I started to look at the schedule and I was thinking like, this is crazy. I got 6 hours of Instagram on my hands here. So we had to split it into 2 days. And And that was really actually kind of a blessing because it opened us up for the opportunity to bring in some other genres. We had Adam Gontier from Saint Sonia, formerly of 3 Days Grace,
Yes.
Josh Ramsey of Mariana's Trench, and Tyler Shaw and Sean Hook. And yeah, it was cool. It taught me like it's obviously way different than doing a physical festival, but it really made my brain start to understand just even a little bit of what festival promoters have to go through as far as people wanting to be at certain times and wanting to be ahead of the other person on the poster and all this
Right,
kind of
right. The
stuff.
billing, the lineup, all of the potential drama that comes along with that too. That's always a struggle. Is you've got backstops in terms of real statistics, market statistics that just don't lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can default to those to a degree, but if you really want an artist involved, and he or she or they would like to be on at a certain time and build a certain way, then you've got to figure that out. You've got to navigate that and try and keep everybody happy. So good on you for being able to pull that off, especially in such a short window in terms of time.
Oh man, yeah, and you know what? We did have some mess ups that we learned a lot. Like, man, Sean Hook was so awesome, such a nice guy, and we gave him the wrong time, and so he was just sitting around waiting for like 2 hours to come on for 15 minutes, and I just felt so bad. This dude is, he's got like a real career in LA. He's signed to Hollywood Records, and he's like, he's representing Canada and LA in a big way in the pop scene, and I just felt awful, so I profusely apologize for that. But other than that, it was actually pretty smooth. It was fun. We ended up, don't tell Best Buy this, but I bought an iPad just for the show, returned it directly after the show. But we had the camera.
They might know now.
Yeah. Oh, secrets out.
Damn it.
But we built a set, like we built a whole set around me, so it really did feel like I was the host, and we had everything on this side of the camera, like the far side from me, the side that I'd be looking at if I was looking at an artist, was all in backwards because the way the Instagram camera works is it has to be filmed that way in order to read. So it was a lot of work. I had a lot of monitors around me with notes that I wanted to talk about, with sponsors that we had to mention at certain times, and keeping everyone happy. So yeah, it was a juggling act, and I learned a lot. And
is that how you underwrote the festival? You procured some sponsors, brought them on board, and then you were able to remunerate some of the artists and obviously pay for your overhead for the festival, whatever degree that was.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't massive, the overhead, but a lot of it was advertising budget. So after we got everything underway, we pulled in Joel Jelinski, a friend of ours that's great with brand connections and sponsors. So he helped a lot on that. We were using some my agent at the time, Feldman, was they had a branch that did sponsorship, so they kind of chipped in a little bit. Yeah, and it really came together quite well. The other part of the team was our digital marketing guy, so everything was reliant on ads and getting the word out, and it all was for charity. So whatever money we made went directly to Unison to try and keep the fires burning in the music industry. And we ended up raising like $54,000, so it was pretty cool.
That's amazing, man. Well done. It's so interesting too, and commendable to a degree, that the default mechanism for a lot of winners in this business is to take disappointment, which you certainly would have had in your heart when you were in your car with your family on the way to the airport to go to Mexico for a family vacation. You had to turn around, come back home, and rather than sort of sit around and sulk, which, by the way, if you do that, you're human. That's fine.
Yeah.
You took that opportunity to channel it into something creative and build something out that hadn't been done before. And it's one of the things I love about artists, like whether it's heartbreak from a relationship, some sort of life experience, they can take that pain and turn it into something that's tangible for the rest of us. Usually that's through music, but in your case, you were able to build out something completely different and creative and involve an entire community who was also in a situation where they were hurting, because we all know artists love to perform just as much as the people love to watch them perform.
Yeah, and I it's such a cool community that we have, especially in Canadian country music, because there's some of my friends out there that are performing artists that are sort of in my lane, and people that are we're we're not at the level of the Bretts and the Dallas Smiths and these guys, but we're also not starting out. We're somewhere in the middle. We're making fans.
Right.
We're making some waves. And it's tough for people in our zone because we rely so much on these live performances and connecting with people, and it's been so cool to see the support just in our artist community. You know, calling, just checking in on people that maybe make a bit of a dark post or something one day, and you just want to touch base and say hi. So it's actually really interesting. Like I've ended up having some great group text conversations with a bunch of artists and producers and stuff like that. So that's been really encouraging throughout this whole thing. And there is a bit of a support network there, and yeah, I just it really did tighten the family, I think, when this whole thing went down with COVID.
Yeah, it's such a great way to analogize our business. The Canadian country music industry is like a family. And that means we've got the same idiosyncrasies as a family. You know, sometimes there's ridiculous rivalries between camps and artists that, you know, you just want to roll your eyes. It's like, guys, no one fucking cares. Like, just get back to doing what you do. And then there's these beautiful moments where everybody comes together, and it's very communal at times too. But when you get everybody in the same room, I'm sure you've borne witness to this. Like at CCMA week, you know, everybody's very congenial. They're very Canadian. They're very polite. Yeah. But when we start getting too much space between us, that's when you start seeing a little bit of the nitpickiness start to crop back up. So it's good on you for creating an opportunity like this that gave people the opportunity to network when no one out there was able to do it in a manner that was tried, true, and tangible to any degree. Are you going to continue to have more festivals under that banner, or what's your plan for the future?
Yeah, well, you know, we did do the Hotel Music Festival. We called that a Dieselbird show as well, and that was in August. And you know, talking about the Canadian country music family, it was so great seeing all those people that were performing on that show, because everyone just had this like excited life in their face, because it was just like, we're playing a show. There's real people here. It's so cool. So that was fun to see, and that was another, you know, a totally different style of an undertaking. We did have a digital live stream component to that, but you know, we were working closely with Rob Cernowski in Calgary. He had secured this venue, and we were dealing with, you know, the city of Calgary for noise and COVID regulations, as well as Alberta Health Services and sponsors. So it ended up working out great. It was a hotel, for anybody that doesn't know it out there, that all the rooms face the pool deck, and so there's about 100 rooms, and we were allowed to do 4 people per room, a cohort, and they could just watch the show on their balcony and, you know, have a drink and not have to drive. And it was actually a really cool concept that,
and it sold out.
Continued on. Yeah, we sold out in a couple days, and again, we were able to raise some money for Unison, and I was able to pay all the artists a little bit of cash, and so everyone left really happy. So 2 positive experiences for Dieselbird. We're not 100% sure where we're going with it, but I think what I'd really like to do is stick to the thing where it's like, be first to the party and innovate and create something, a new solution for the industry. And I know we're talking about some ideas when live music kind of gets closer back to normal, about some sort of unique touring,
socially
setups.
Distanced. Yeah.
I mean, who knows what it's going to look like. So I'm finding it really hard to visualize and to plan and to put any real, you know, things in motion, just because I can't predict what the timeline's going to be like at all. It's crazy out there.
I think that's one of the most frustrating things from the industry side is I've always felt that the job of a manager or an agent is to provide their client with a degree of certainty. You know, here's what we're capable of in the marketplace. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can't do. And here's why. And all of that has been taken away by and large by the irregularities in some of the protocols and procedures around COVID. And listen, I'm not shitting on the administrators or you know, the people whose job it is to protect us in a strange time like this. But you know, there are some real inconsistencies that really feel like it's targeting the live music business. And I know it's not malicious, but you know, when a casino has to shut down their showroom, for example, despite the fact that we've got plexiglass 6 feet high across the front of the stage. The nearest audience member is 24 feet away. Everybody's grouped in bubbles at tables and they're wearing masks. And that is prohibited, but you can go wander the casino floor, the gaming floor, and play slots and bump and brush against people, which I assume is happening. And that's fine. You know, it's like, well, who's making those rules? You know,
I totally feel you, man. I feel like the live music industry is completely an afterthought to those kind of situations, and it's just nothing really makes sense. And I know there's not any real great way to deal with this unless it's like a hard lockdown for, you know, everything's canceled for a couple months, which maybe that's the answer. Because right now, to me, it feels like we have a designated pissing section in the pool. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like some people are being safe, but some people are allowed to go do whatever they want over there. And it's just like,
yeah,
it's not helping. It just keeps,
and the piss is making
happening.
its way to all sections of the pool.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So
I get that. I mean, I also think that the pandemic response template is something that should be a bit more nuanced depending on the fatalities of whatever disease they're trying to protect us from. Like, obviously, this isn't the first pandemic. This won't be the last. But I would imagine that the responses are somewhat templated to different degrees, I'm sure. But I'm hoping that we can continue to learn about this disease, that science can reveal to us all of the truths it needs to, so that we can build out, you know, safe mechanisms where we can plan concerts again. And, you know, I've been saying for a long time to anybody that I've had discussions with from that world, like, hey, listen, we'll play by the rules, but we need some fucking rules. So, you know, you got to help us with that. I'm not an epidemiologist. I can't come up with the protocol, but what I can do is enforce them at my shows and make sure that everyone's safe, that we don't create super spreader events. But I need some help so that we can plan and we can give artists a degree of certainty again. And if that means we're doing drive-in shows all next summer, well, then fine. Let's just do that, right? Like we made it work this past summer. We'll make it work again if we need to. But the inability to plan, I think, is one of the things that's really gutting our business right now. And so I'm hoping we're going to get more direction from the individual provinces, from the health authorities, from the epidemiologists to prioritize, to a degree, an industry that indirectly employs almost 3% of the entire population of this country.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like it's an industry that doesn't make money. Like, there's a lot.
Billions.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So I don't know. Do you find, like, the promoters and you know, people that are putting on these big shows and tours and things like that, is there any insider info for you guys? Or are you just waiting for the announcements like everyone else is?
The conversations are ongoing, but it's not like we're getting any degree of certainty. And listen, I get it. I think that if you're in an administrative position, with the government, you probably don't want to stick your neck out, right? So
that's probably true.
I would imagine that there's, you know, that it's very difficult to obtain tangible, credible information, because a lot of people just don't know exactly where this thing is going to go in the next 3-4 months, and they don't want to stick their neck out. And I understand, you know, if I were in that position, I probably would be just trying to hang on to my job at this point in time, you know, and contribute as best as I could. But one thing that's concerning me a little bit is the festivals for next summer, because if you look at a festival like Boots and Hearts, for example, I've actually got Brooke Dunford. Well, she'll have been on the podcast by the time that your podcast with me airs. And we talked a little bit about the dangers of a reduced capacity scenario. So if you've paid your headliners a certain amount of money and you've built your budget around being able to sell 20,000 tickets, and the government comes in a month before your show and reduces your capacity down to 10,000 or 5,000 people, you know, how does that affect your ability to execute an event? Well, it basically just takes you right out of the mix altogether, right? So
Well, you can't get the same talent that you would initially want, like those like marquee world headliner talents.
yeah,
Kind of they fall off the map completely for you.
right. So it could be a good year for Canadian country music artists, especially if the border remains closed up until late spring, which it could. Um, but that's the part that's scaring me a little bit with the outdoor festivals. The indoor stuff is just that's going to roll back whenever it rolls back. Like whenever we're allowed to have people indoors for concerts again, whether it's once we reach some point of herd immunity or whether or not there's some sort of safety mechanism or protocol in place that allows us to put people together under a roof, that's going to come back whenever it does. It might take another year, might take another 6 months. We might have something rolling by second quarter next year. But the outdoor festivals, that's the one that really scares me. That's the one that really feels up in the air, because if you've made these commitments to the Eric Churches of the world, and he's blocked his entire weekend to come to Canada that summer, and you've paid out deposits, it gets really weird if suddenly you're dealing with a quarter or half the capacity that you thought you had, and you're trying to make your numbers work. Like it's going to get,
it hurts your brand too for these acts coming up from the States or whatever, and if they come to your show and it's just like, well, this is like 4,000 people, this isn't 20,000 people. It's just like mentally that might change how people look at the brand too, which is not good for those big festivals, especially the ones that are sort mom and pop air quote festivals. Like up until recently, Big Valley was like that. It's just Big Valley is all in house, and there's no
right.
there's no big network, and I feel like the people that are putting on those independent festivals are probably going to be in a hard place. I think that the landscape, tell me if I'm wrong here, I think the landscape of festivals in 2 years from now might look completely different, and I think we might not see a lot of the same names that we used to. Do you think that's a valid?
Oh, I think we're going to lose anywhere between 20 and 40% of the festivals that we see on the landscape now. Now, listen, they will come back because we always see a boom bust cycle in festivals. I've been in the business for 20 years, and I'll see every 5 years there'll be new festivals cropping up. A bunch are going to go broke, and then you've got your mainstays, and that changes the landscape. And then a few years later, everybody jumps into the festival game again because they think they can make millions of dollars, and they don't understand the overhead, the cash outlay, and so you just have these cycles continuing. Now, I think those cycles are going to be elongated, and then the festivals are going to minimize for a significant period of time, probably a couple of years, and then they'll garner more capital, more investment opportunities, and more festivals will crop back up eventually. But we definitely all have to pull together and play the long game for sure.
Yeah, it's I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and he had some epidemiologist or whatever, somebody, some fancy pants scientist guy who was an expert on the subject, and he was saying that they're predicting that by 2024 we're gonna have a period that's reminiscent of the Roaring '20s, where it's just people are out all the time, hungry for seeing each other in social situations, whether it's a bar or a live music show or whatever. And I'm wondering if that's going to be something that you and I notice in a couple of years, if it's just like, oh my God, things are really rolling now. We're back. We're back. I hope so.
Well, I mean, there are some transferable concepts from physics to real life, right? Like the idea that every action has an opposite and equal reaction. And so I don't disagree with that premise. I think that people are going to be pent up. They're going to be, once the fear has subsided, the fear in terms of how the media is either responsibly or irresponsibly reporting or hyperbolizing this pandemic. And by the way, that's all going to bear itself out in the future. We're going to decide in 5 to 10 years from now whether we felt like this was being covered fairly, and whether we thought that our protocols and procedures were on point or overreaching or maybe not enough. Once the fear leaves the conversation, then I think people are going to be back in full force. I think the consumer market is going to be great. The only asterisk I would say there is these lockdowns have taken down with them a number of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the economy is going to have to get reshaped a little bit, reformed, and revivified to a degree before people are going to have, too much in the way of income, especially expendable income, to attend shows. So that's the only thing that I think is a little bit different from, say, the Roaring Twenties, where we came
Right.
out of a pandemic, First World War, a stock market boom, which predicated the Roaring
Expendable
Twenties.
income. Yeah.
Right, right. And then, of course, the Dirty Thirties followed that. So
We don't want that. You
yeah,
know what's so crazy?
equal and opposite.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing, talking about shows and stuff going on, I reached out to somebody that was part of the team that booked me in Beijing a couple years ago, and they're saying that in China, everything's back to normal. Like they're doing full on shows, and they don't. I think they've restricted travel leaving China and coming into China a little bit, but as far as I know, like live music is kind of normal there. And I have a
Well,
brother.
they've had a vaccine in China for a few months now, and they've been. I would imagine, the good thing about a totalitarian centralized government is
Go
that they
on.
can move.
Yeah.
They can move quickly.
Yeah.
They can move quickly on the population without a lot of back and forth,
Yeah,
right?
there's not
Like
going to be a whole lot of people going like, "I don't trust the government. I do what I want." There's probably a little
right,
less of
there
that
are
over there.
people who I'm sure feel that way and say that, but they can't say it publicly. So that's what makes the difference. Now, listen, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that the ability to manipulate the population is far easier in a communist dictatorship situation like they have over there, right? So I would
100%.
imagine they've forced vaccines. I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine they've been able to get across the board compliance, let's say, from their
Yeah.
citizenship to participate in whatever vaccine program they've had, and that's probably been very successful, and maybe that's the reason why things have come back so quickly. And listen, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I do understand why people might have some concerns about a vaccine that's mass produced in a very short amount of time
Yeah,
and
you don't want to
hasn't
be the
gone
first
through.
one to get it, right? Like it
Right,
feels
right. Like
like,
I,
yeah,
I get it. I mean, I understand why people might have some trepidation.
totally.
So
Yeah, I
fair
get that for
enough.
sure. It's
But if it does return us to some degree of normalcy, if the side effects are not to the degree that they are, overly harmful, then I think you're going to get buy-in almost across the board because people do want to get back to some semblance of normalcy. And I understand that, but again, I also understand the people on the other side of the argument who are going like, I don't know, man, I don't want to be a guinea pig for this thing. I get it. Fair
yeah.
enough.
Yeah, it is a little scary. You're putting something into your body. It's so interesting that the different experiences that people have throughout this whole thing. Like I have a brother-in-law who lives in Taiwan, and they never really had an issue at all. Like a tiny little island, and I think it's there's probably a little bit more of a military kind of a police influence there. But he says
Did they lock down hard and heavy in the beginning?
yeah, no flights in or out, and even though they're so proximity, they're tight proximity to China, they were fine. They never had any cases. No one was really enforcing anything crazy, and they still have these like I saw a picture of this massive DJ festival with I don't know like 10,000 people at it or whatever, and it's just like man, what a different world that those guys are living in right now. So it's interesting,
Right.
but
Right.
yeah.
Well, when it comes back here, it is going to come back in a big way. And I think those of us in the entertainment business are really excited about that.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna see the creative boom of whatever it is, 2021 or two, and that's gonna be cool. I know everybody I've been talking to is just trying to stay busy and keep on top of that because we're all expecting everybody to come out guns a blazing when it's time to go.
How has it affected you in terms of creativity, giving you more time, obviously, with the family, giving you more time to write, more time to prepare? Have you found that it's been a real boon for that aspect of your career?
Yeah, actually, I've been learning a lot. I've been trying to put into practice. I can't remember where I heard it. It's just something I read or heard somewhere where they're saying like lots of successful CEOs take 10 to 15 minutes a day to just sit and think. And so I'm trying to pull that into the beginning of my day and just really plan out what I want to accomplish throughout the day, and basically throughout a bit of a long term, a couple month sort of span. And it's really allowed me to focus on learning a lot and keeping busy, spinning lots of plates. So I've been writing and producing tons for other people. I've been really digging into a couple certain projects, in some different genres. I've been doing a lot of rock music lately, which has been fun. I've been pitching songs to K-pop and J-pop artists, and and so a lot of that is just flowing nonstop, and it's allowed me to come up with some sort of crazier, more viral projects that I want to get more into on the video side of things too. So, I mean, it's actually been really an interesting refresher for my brain. This summer especially, where we drop in 15, 20 grand on Air Canada, didn't have to do that, and I got a lot of time in the backyard to sit and think and plan and come up with, how do I keep the engine burning while I'm not out there on the road. And it's a different mindset to take, but it's a really great, it's a great way to up your marketing game, I think.
I think a lot of us are so busy, and this goes for the industry side too. You're flying by the seat of your pants a lot of times. It's like you're planning this tour, you're jumping on a plane, you're joining up with tour XYZ, you're out on the road, and you might have, like, for me, I've got a daily list, so I compile a list every night before I go to bed of what I need to do the next day, and then I check off those items, right? And that's everything from family time to the things I want to do to maintain my health, to my duties as an agent, manager, and label head. So I check off this list, but I've been much more diligent and methodical on that since I've actually been home and had time to plan. And I think that that's going to be one of the big benefits that comes out of this pandemic, is that we're in a business where everybody's going 90 miles an hour all the time. And finally, we've had a minute to sit in park and think and really plan out where we want to see our careers go in the next 5 to 10 years. For those of us who have been in a position where you could take advantage of the time that we've had to spare to do that. I mean, a lot of people have had to pick up part-time jobs and just make ends meet. And I get they're not necessarily in the same position, but it's been good for a reset in terms of that aspect. And it's been interesting to see it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of your world, because you're creative at the best of times. I mean, tell us a little bit about, well, first off, I want to talk in a moment about your transition from rock to country, and the fact that you still maintained a lot of relationships in the world of rock, and you still write a lot, you still produce projects in that world. But tell us a little bit about how you came up with some of these concepts for some of these videos that have gone viral. I mean, Found was sort of the first one that was like a minimal budget, but everybody got a kick out of that video. The single ended up going gold. Give us a little backstory into that, and then some of the other projects that you're proud of.
Yeah, well, I think my mindset coming into country music 4 or 5 years ago hadn't really changed from what I'd done in the indie rock world. It was always, for me, we were always just it was always gritty, and we were always doing whatever we could on our own dime, and it wasn't always shiny. And I know we couldn't always afford to make it shiny, so we had to make sure that the subject matter, like whatever we were shooting, was compelling somehow. So what I was mentioning, Travis is my partner in a lot of this stuff. Travis is also from that world. He was a singer in a rock band that we used to tour with a lot. So we kind of had the same thing. We were always making these behind the scenes kind of stupid, funny road videos. And
quick plug for Travis Nesbitt. Follow the guy on socials. He's brilliant. He's got a sense of humor that definitely emulates yours.
yeah,
I totally understand why you two are a fit.
yeah, it's a good complimentary thing. And we just, we have the most hilarious text messages when it comes to video planning. But for Found, for example, it was like I just put out the song and it just kind of took off, and it was great because it's established a momentum that I had to keep up with the song in order to establish a career. So it was top 20 before I knew it, and I was like, we need to get a video done for this, like, this weekend, to put it out, because CMT was still a thing, and that was something I really wanted to conquer. So I had $500 and I called him. I was like, what can we do for $500? And we sat on YouTube for a second and we're just like, I don't know. Should we just like get some mascot costumes and embarrass our friends? And we're like, yeah, let's do that. So that was the video treatment. We went to the theater garage in Edmonton and rented some costumes, and we just shot a video, and we didn't plan anything. We just kind of shot as we went, and it was kind of performance-y, and yeah, I don't know what happened, but it took off and it went well. And we were like, okay, there's something there. There's something to this sort of punk rock, just roll and shoot and run and gun kind of style. So when I put out my second single, Barn Burner, I'd got a grant for the video, and it wasn't much. Like it was like $5,000 or something like that, which is not a lot when you're making a video. So we didn't really have an idea, and we had to start shooting. Our window was closing, so we were chatting on the phone. And I was like, I don't know, should we do a travel thing maybe? And he's like, yeah, that'd be cool. And I was like, well, we love Hawaii. Let's just go to Hawaii, and we'll just, we could bring our wives, and we'll just kind of hang, and we'll shoot something on the beach. And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. And I was just explaining to my wife what our plan was here, which was basically nothing. And he calls me back, and he's like, hey, tell Jen she can't come. We're going to Japan. He hangs up the phone. So, okay, yeah. So basically, we came up with this concept in the Barn Burner video that they were going to dress me up like a cross between Elton John and John Wayne, and plop me in the middle of Tokyo, and we would just watch how weird Japanese people thought I was. Yeah, so it was great, man. Like that was a life-changing experience, and it's so funny. Like it was so great because nobody knew what country music was over there. So me walking around in like a 10-gallon cowboy hat and like spurs and everything's white and rhinestone and stuff. People just were stopping me on the street to take pictures, or they were horribly embarrassed for me and wouldn't even make eye contact. So it was the first day of shooting. I was so embarrassed I had to get hammered. And then after that, it was great.
How much time did you spend over there?
We were only there for 5 or 6 days. But when that video came out, people were talking a lot about it. And I was like, I think I'm becoming the video guy. So we got to keep up in the game. And the third one, we decided to do not a travel one, but we bought like $500 worth of cardboard, and we converted my garage into the bridge of the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek. My wife was very confused. My daughters have no idea what I do for a living, and frankly, neither do I. But it was hilarious. And then after it was out, I was just reposted this morning, but Colonel Chris Hatfield retweeted it, and and that pretty much made it all worth it for me on that one.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, that video is hilarious. I think there's something, especially in the country music world, that fans and consumers really gravitate towards an underdog, and when you can play into that role a little bit by going, yeah, you know what, this isn't a big budget video, but we're going to make it fucking hilarious, and we're going to have some fun, and it's going to be authentic. I think there's something about that that's really appealing. It explains why, separate somewhat from the argument I just made about the country music consumer and their proclivities, but it explains why some of the most viral videos on YouTube are made on a shoestring budget. People get a kick out of it. They go like, oh, geez, if I were more creative, maybe I could pull something like that off. It sort of gives everybody a sliver of hope if they're a creator to any degree, right? To go, hey, listen, you can pull off the P. Diddy style music videos with a $1.3 million budget.
Yeah.
But you also have the opportunity to create something almost out of thin air that's going to resonate. And
that's what's
and people
so cool.
They just like to cheer for the underdog, right? And those videos sort of positioned you in that world that way. It's like, you can tell they're not big budget, but they're super creative. And that's the most endearing aspect to them.
I think I think so. I mean, I hope that's what the case is. For me, it's like, there's so many gatekeepers in this industry, and doing things on my own terms as far as viral content on YouTube or Facebook allows me to kind of circumvent them a little bit and stick some little plant some seeds in the fans in a different way if there's some traditional areas that I'm having trouble breaking into, whether it be like top 10 on commercial radio or something like that.
Right.
At least I can come at it from a different side and do something a little bit different, and it helps forward the narrative a little bit. Like for example, I found a bunch of these line dancers online that were in France and in Hungary and in Italy, And I was going over to France to do a festival anyway. So I brought Travis and with me, and Russ, our assistant director and creative partner as well. And we just like contacted these people and we made a music video featuring all these line dancers from around the world. So we were in Budapest and we were in Milan and we were all in all these cool places. And it helps sort of people think like, oh, this is, he's doing something on a global scale. This is really interesting that there's people from around the world that know his music and are dancing to it. So not only is it interesting content, but it helps me forward the narrative like, hey, I'm indie, but I'm doing stuff, right? And things are happening. And that's kind of what
And you're
the
traveling the
vibe that I'm
world,
trying to put out
which
there.
is
Yeah.
a
I
cool
mean,
side benefit.
I thought for sure when I was done in the rock and roll world that international travel was over. I just, because country music, it's football, it's Canada, America, and a little bit Australia for the most part. I mean, there are little nuggets that are starting to emerge now, but those are the three main
Yeah,
markets.
the UK is really coming along.
Yeah, and I've been really trying to plant some seeds over there, and I love going to England to work and hang. But yeah, for coming from a rock band, I thought that rock was more of an international kind of a touring genre. But we only went to the States in my old band, and with country music, I've been to 7 countries, so it's crazy, really. I really hope that I can continue to develop in the UK. I think it's going to be it's going to be a market that I think is the next emerging country market.
Well, you made a good point about gatekeepers, and I've always been of the mindset that the more that we can sort of mitigate gatekeepers, the more creativity will flow to the surface and flourish, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the negative thing about gatekeepers is and I know this is a massive generalization, but they generally want to put their stamp on something, or they want to homogenize uh, a sound or a vibe or a brand. And when that happens, even though it might become successful, you kill a little bit of what that artist might stand for, and so I think the more we've got direct access to the marketplace in terms of artists and indie artists like yourself, the more creative innovation we're going to see over and over again, because you're not running your art past a committee of executives who all have their subjective opinion on it.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to go, I'm going to put this video together and I'm going to convert my garage to the Starship Enterprise, and I'm going to actually have some fun with how insane that idea is by integrating my wife and children into the video.
Sadly.
Like, oh my God, that is such for people who don't know what I'm talking about, just go to Dan Davidson's YouTube channel, run through those music videos. You'll get a kick out of them. I guarantee if you haven't borne witness to them or listened to the songs, you will be entertained.
Oh man. Well, it is
Yeah.
it is interesting what you're saying there. I feel like there's a lot I think the gatekeeper side of things, it's because there's a lot of fear in the music industry. Everyone wants to keep their job, obviously, and it's a really cool place to be, and no one wants to change things. But
You don't want
from
to
an
rock the
artist,
boat.
exactly right. And I think that's on the industry side of things. I think that's something I can sense. But for me, it's like what you're saying. I don't want that to affect or water down what I'm doing. So I'm trying to figure out those ways to still do what I do and still make them happy and still make the fans engaged. And I think that's the real balance of it all. And it's so hard. Like it's tricky and it's frustrating because when you're forging your own path, sometimes, you hit a dead end and you got to turn back and find a new way too. So, yeah, and I think that's where I'm at, and I'm happy to do that because I'm honestly having more fun doing what I'm doing now than I ever have in my last 15 years or whatever doing music, and it's really interesting. And I think part of that is being able to express personality that's honest and
Right.
not put on play the game too much. And yeah, I think that the music videos kind of show that. You're talking about my wife and kids in the video. There was a video I released, I can't even remember when it was, about 9 months ago now, called I Do, which I co-wrote in England. And I was going to put Jen in the video, my wife. And the day after we shot, I was supposed to go to Europe to play some shows and do some stuff. So we only had one day to shoot. Jen had thrown out her back that night, so we didn't know what we were gonna do. And I was like, you know what? This was gonna be a sweet music video. It's Valentine's Day kind of thing. It was gonna be an epic date for me and my wife doing all these amazing things. So I was like, let's just do the video, and we'll call my friend Mike to play Jen. So we got Mike Nash from the Prairie States, a band here in town in Edmonton.
Right.
And Mike and I went on this epic bro date.
Love
and
Mike,
then,
great guy.
and then we just slapped Jen's face on Mike's body, hairy chest and all. And we put it out and people were like, oh, this is so sweet that you did this for your wife. And I was like, I think I did this to my wife. So yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I'm trying to chase, is those things that make me laugh and make other people laugh.
Oh, I'm sure one of the reasons she married you is for your sense of humor. So, I'm sure she got it. But it's an interesting point you make about gatekeepers, and then I want to leave that subject behind for a little bit. But it's almost like if you're in that position, I understand the desire to want to keep your job, but you have a duty that's somewhat incumbent upon you to roll the dice every now and then, and to try something that doesn't necessarily fit inside the box and take it to the marketplace and see what people think and let the market decide and judge. And again, I understand why people don't want to do that, but it's important to do that every now and then, because you can be on the vanguard. You can be on the vanguard of how the industry evolves, right? Like, the people who never take risks in this business might keep their job forever, but they rarely go down in terms of legendary legacy as someone who was a game changer, right?
Dude, I'm so glad you said that. I think that's 100% true. I know people have to, get the job done and do the things.
Toe the line.
Yeah, to some extent, because it's just like the industry works on that. But I think you're right. Like, I think like sticking your neck out on something you believe in is honorable, and it's great, and it just shows. It shows. I don't know, just investment in the art and in the industry, and I like that. I think that's cool.
Well, and we're also hypersensitive to negative emotion too, and negative feedback, and that is all available in real time thanks to social media. So again, I understand why people go, well, I don't want to stick my neck out because I could lose my job, I could lose some status, I could fail, but that's where the magic is found. By people stepping outside of the realm of what's acceptable currently, or and building out, like I said before, a vanguard of where the industry is going to evolve. And you've been able to do that creatively. And in your journey from rock to country, what did you notice in terms of cultural differences between those worlds? So, you're playing a rock festival. I'm sure it's got a certain vibe. I'm sure the audience has a certain vibe. I'm sure the buyers and promoters have a certain vibe, versus what you're doing when you go out and play a country festival, which is generally a bit of a different thing.
Yeah, I mean, there was a big perspective change, I think, for me, because when I started doing Tupelo Honey, I was 19, and we did that for a long time. So like, I think my expectations as far as what I wanted out of a music career has grown, as well as changes in people's reaction and in embracing of the genre a little bit. So when I started, it was early 2000s, I think, and it felt like rock was in a really healthy place. People wanted to see live music, they wanted to see rock music, and they wanted to have fun and party and be loud and kind of get crazy. And that was great. I think radio was a healthy place for us. Much music was working, and we didn't know what we were doing. I had no idea about the industry. I was just happy to play guitar and just go out on the road all the time. I often think back,
I don't think that's an anomaly.
Yeah, I mean, I think back now as a person that has to handle all these things. If I'd only known, the stuff I know now, I feel like Tupelo Honey probably never would have stopped. But yeah, it was a good place. The vibe was open. I feel like there was a bit of a competitiveness amongst artists in that world at the time, and it was kind of silly, really. I think it was a little macho or something. Like, it was just like, music's not football. You can't win. It's just everyone should be happy we have a scene and support each other. And it wasn't the case in those days, at least in Western Canada. And yeah, and then as we got older and we grew, that's
really driven from scarcity, though. I really feel, when I see when I see our business get a little bit, the Canadian country music business, when I see it get a little bit ridiculous and the rivalries get ridiculous, usually it's driven from a place of scarcity and fear. And, if that individual acquires something, then now it's suddenly not available for me. But the reality is, you're right. Everybody can have their own lane. Everybody can have their own career. Not everybody's going to win Male Artist of the Year. But at the end of the day, if you're making a living at what you love, and you're creating a fan base that's loyal, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, that's the win right there. And Ralph James, when we were with the agency group back in the day, said something to me that always stuck with me. He just pulled me aside one day. He's like, never think about or talk about or even look for what other artists are doing. It's all about what you're doing. You can't compare anybody else's progression to what you're doing because it's completely different. And I think that is great advice. I really held on to that. And I still get those feelings of jealousy and stuff like that when I see somebody around me who does something that
you're
pops
human.
off. Yeah, and it's completely normal. But I think I've now, after years of doing this, I've learned to be like, okay, well, that's cool. What can I do to make my version of that success? And that's kind of more what I try to keep in mind when those little nuggets of jealousy flare up, and it does happen for sure. But yeah,
it's a sign of emotional intelligence to be inspired and learn from people who are successful rather than be jealous and frustrated by it, right? And by the way, I subscribe to the jealousy aspect all the time. I'm still human, but you've got to pull yourself back from that, sort of engage the frontal lobe and go, okay, well, that was good on them for pulling that off. I wonder what tactics and strategies they use that I could integrate into my own project to make it successful, as opposed to, screw that guy and his camp. And, there's just no utility in that mindset.
No. And you know what I find too, for me, I get those feelings more now when I see a younger artist that figures something out way before I figured it out. And it's like, that little bastard. But like, for example, there's a guy, I think he's from Edmonton, as a rapper named Tom McDonald, and he put out a couple songs and it just like exploded online. And he for example, he put out, he's not super, he hasn't been in the game that long. And he put out a video this week that had 1 million views in a day, and it was like number 7 on iTunes trending, or on YouTube trending. And I was like, man, this is crazy. And for me, I think experiencing the way the industry used to be, coming up in a time where I really felt the big shift. Like there's part of me that understands how the old world works, and nowadays it seems more and more like either you explode overnight or you don't at all. And like, I mean, that's an obvious, clear, wild generalization, but when these are the things that you see on social media that make you go like, it's like.
So in a situation like that, where your first instinct was natural, by the way, I'm not beating you up for this, but to be somewhat jealous, how did you step away from that and learn something from what that artist has been able to do? Like what did you take out of that experience of bearing witness to that's actually been of utility to you?
Well, I was looking at his content a lot and kind of analyzing what he does, and I think I understand a lot of factors play into the success of it, like the demographic of who his fans would be, where they are. It's America focused for sure, and it's a genre thing, hip hop, massive in America, and there was some real sort of like what do you call it? Just like controversial topics and things like that get shared a lot. So it's a different nature of something that I would do. So I understand the viral appeal to it, and it kind of made me step back and be like, okay, that's cool. And then I looked on his Instagram and his Facebook page. I'm really using this guy as an example, but and I saw he was interacting with his fans and some of the actions that he's taking to keep his fans engaged. And you learn a lot from different tricks on how people present themselves online. And I like that. I thought that was really great. And I think it's really cool. Yeah, I can't remember.
But to be fair, those are all things you do anyway. By and large, it's just a matter of finding that right song that connects, like, and that's the critical mass. You can enact the proper tactics and strategies and have a great work ethic, but still for some reason not connect just because you don't have the right song at the time. right? Like
Yeah,
that's a
there's
real issue.
totally, and there's a lot of timing things and stuff that goes into it too. So I always try and encourage, you know, maybe newer or even people that are just in a point in their career where they feel like they're not connecting. It's not. I feel like some people have great songs, and it's sometimes they're just a victim of timing and circumstance. And I don't think they should discredit their creative efforts as something that's not good enough. Um, there's certain people that are so talented that just haven't got the break yet. And I always think that there's a time and a place when the stars really line up, and if you can just be great and not go away, you get more of those chances. That's what it
Yeah,
feels like to me anyway.
100%. I couldn't agree more that, relentlessness is one of the assets that you need to have as an artist, because, if you've got a rose-colored glasses perspective on the industry and you think you're going to put out a song and everybody's going to love it as much as your mom does, you could be setting yourself up for a lot of failure, and that's why I'm a big fan too of artists working diligently to surround themselves with people who tell them the things that they need to hear as opposed to the things they want to hear. They're going to get a lot of the latter from their friends and family, and they're going to get that support that they need to sort of feed the ego fire to get them charged up enough to take another run. But they need those people around them who are like, hey, listen, like if you did this, this, and this, maybe there's a chance that we could actually get the success that you're striving for. And sometimes those conversations are very hard. I've had lots of managers on the podcast, and we've talked in depth about how important it is to have that dynamic of positive, reinforced encouragement, but also the ability and the dynamic to be able to disagree with your client in order to help steer them towards the goals and objectives that they've outlined. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's a
sometimes
big part of it.
it takes a real friend to tell you suck sometimes.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
which is kind of true. Like I find I've learned which people in my immediate circle will tell me something's awesome all the time, and which people will tell me like, you could do better. And
Right.
that's helpful to me,
And to defend the people who are consistently supportive, I mean, they might actually believe everything they're telling you. They, subjectively speaking, especially when it comes to art, sometimes people are like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And yet, it doesn't crack the top 100 on the radio chart, right? Like there are people out there who just want to encourage you no matter what you're doing. And you need those people too. But you do need the opposite dynamic of that at times, and not necessarily people to tell you you suck. I guarantee you those aren't the conversations you're having when you're having difficult conversations with your inner
not
circle.
at
It's
all,
more
of
sort of
course.
like, why don't we try this or try that? And or we've tried this same tactic or strategy 6 times before and it hasn't worked. So why are we banging our head against the wall? You need more people like that to steer you back to some semblance of reality, and to help build out a perspective of how you're viewed by the marketplace so that you don't fall victim to delusion.
Yeah, and that's really important. I think that I really like what you said there about maybe we should try doing this or this. I love when people come back with an alternate idea instead of just saying, no, that's not right. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's so hard enough already to get everybody on the same page or to come up with a strategy that you can get behind, but to have somebody just squash it, it sucks so bad. So that's cool that you said that.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the worst things about the ability to tear things down in this modern world that we live in social media is the fact that it can really spurn creativity, but also it's easy to tear things down. It's easy to say something sucks subjectively, or that, and you see this heavily in the political world. It's like, it doesn't matter what politician A, B, C does, because the opposing politician is going to always criticize it. And I'm more of a, as a voter, I'm like, well, let me hear your ideas then. I mean, I know why you think they suck no matter what they do, but I really want to hear from you. Like, what would you do differently? Like you saw this recently in the US with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and that heavily contentious election and all the divisiveness. But it's like, you know, I totally understand why you might want to criticize Trump's approach to the pandemic, but how would you have done it differently? That's
Yeah.
where we actually get the meat and potatoes of the discussion of where we want to go. And taking that analogy and applying it creatively, it's like, to just shit on something doesn't take any skill, but to take something and refine it, to take a lump of coal and help compress it into a diamond, that takes nuance. That takes some back and forth. That takes pressure, and in order to
Yeah.
do that, you have to have that dynamic with your artist where you can go, hey, listen, I think there's 6 things about this song that are amazing, but I think if you could improve on these last 3 things, you've got a real smash, right? And that just takes digging in, doing your research, and being more certain about where you actually stand on these things.
Yeah, and I think that was always a tough thing for sort of a weird segue back to what we were talking about. For me in the rock world is we were all indie all the way, so we were a band that was kind of our own voice of reason, which was tough at times because it became just a painful democracy in the band. We were making any decision was really labored, and we wanted to make sure everyone's voice was heard, but without like a clear leader. Sometimes it was really tricky to pull the trigger on things. But I mean, that taught me a lot about people and how to properly respect somebody's opinion while still getting something done. And so that there's a lot of life skills actually that came from that rock world. We got to learn a lot about the industry. I had crash course in basic management and booking shows and graphic design and video editing and tour managing and all this kind of stuff, and it's been a different experience in country. I was able to build a team pretty quickly, and that was great. But yeah, I mean, I guess this is a nice segue to circle back to the rock and roll world a little bit here.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that interband dynamic, I mean, there's sort of 3 ways to navigate decision making in that process. It can be tyranny, which is, I'm the lead, what I say goes, and you're all replaceable and I'm not, right? And some bands subscribe to that. If it works for them, it works for them. There's manipulation.
Yeah.
And that's pretty self-explanatory. And then there's diplomatic maneuvering where everyone's got a bit of give and take, but the dynamic feels right creatively, and generally there's consensus, but sometimes there isn't, and somebody needs to sort of like be the hammer at that point in time and really convince the rest of the band why they need to go a certain direction or put out a certain single or whatever the decision making is, right? So in your world, I would imagine, given your personality, you're more of the diplomatic maneuvering type.
Band mom. Yep. I was band mom for sure. But everyone was super cool in that band, so it was easy. We were all buddies for such a long time that it wasn't the hardest thing in the world to do, although it was painful sometimes when it came to big decisions. But it really is a different experience as a solo artist, because now I just roll, I just keep going, keep the momentum happening, and it is about quality, but it is about quantity too. Like, I like to make sure that it's always exciting, and I'm pulling the trigger on something all the time. So I mean, that I don't think I could ever be in the position I'm in today without having those years in Tupelo Honey, because it was really like going to music industry university, just learning everything the hard way, seeing the country, seeing the hard parts about touring, seeing what I wanted out of music and what I loved about music, which I found out was really at its core was connecting with people and meeting people, and it's I don't know what it is. It's just something. There's like a bit of a sociological aspect to it that I think I really love about music. I love creating and stuff, obviously, as well, but I think communicating the creation is the real fun.
Well, and I think it's important too, like you mentioned this earlier, in reflection. You're like, man, I wish I would have known what I know now back then. But you got to cut yourself some slack in those moments too, because the reality is you probably wouldn't have absorbed those lessons to the degree you did if you hadn't had the experiential knowledge versus someone telling you or reading it somewhere, right? Like, there is something about real life lived experience that imprints itself in your mind, your emotions, and that's something that currently we can't replicate, right? Like when you learn a lesson the hard way, there's a reason they call it that. It's because now you know how not to do things. Or the opposite is also true. It's like, wow, that really worked. That's something that we can continue to do. But if I had read that in a book or somebody had told me, I wouldn't have had the same level of appreciation for the lesson as I do now.
Totally. It's one of those like easy for you to say kind of things, but yeah, it was cool what I got to see and go through, especially when like Tupelo, when we were kind of getting towards the end of our career as a band. I found excuse me, that we put out our last record, and it was, I thought, creatively our best thing. I thought we nailed it, but I got to see a really dramatic shift in the industry. It was the second time I got to see a dramatic industry shift. And this time it was in rock and roll. This genre had just completely changed. Radio had completely changed, and rock radio in Canada all of a sudden was Five Finger Death Punch, super heavy, or the Lumineers, which is folk essentially,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
there was no place in the middle for Tupelo Honey, and we started to see how hard that was going to be for us, and yeah, I mean, eventually it allowed us to consider the possibility of exploring other opportunities, which we all did, but yeah.
Do
So
you
that
think
was
you'll
the
ever
second.
get that band to get back together and do somewhat of a reunion run or something? Have you guys talked about that?
Yeah, we kick it around once in a while. We get offers from time to time to do it, but it'd be a lot of work. I'd have to relearn
You got to
so much.
relearn a lot of shit. Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be. I would love to do it. And right now, I'm kind of getting my rock and roll fix in some different ways. Like I've been co-writing and producing Clayton Bellamy's upcoming rock record, which is amazing. And I've got a rock song in the top 20 right now, or top 30, I guess, from a Saskatoon band called Weapons that I co-wrote and produced. And yeah, I wrote a couple songs with the Standstills. They're working with Neil from 3 Days Grace right now. So I'm still plugged in over there a little bit, and I'm getting my fix that way. But it would be fun to put out a rock song again one day, and I might still do it. But working on it's actually what I've been really loving in COVID time is making sure that my brain is like creatively spread out like that, like doing some rock stuff for other people, doing some country stuff for me, and like getting pitches from my publisher to pitch to bands in Asia. It's hilarious. Like taking off my mid-30s suburban country guy hat and putting on my 15-year-old Korean girl hat. It's a bit of a shift, but it's
I would
been
say so.
creatively quite the exercise, and I love it. I think it's hilarious and so much fun because they cram every possible nook of every genre into pop songs, and it's a roller coaster ride. So yeah, I mean, that's another great thing about Tupelo is it allowed me to establish relationships with my publisher, who I've been with for a long time now. We've had a lot of wins together, whether it's Tupelo Honey or song pitches or country stuff that I'm doing. So
Shout out to Red Brick.
yeah, Red Brick Songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So I mean, your original question, you're talking about the things that I've noticed in the shift in the vibe between rock and country.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I noticed coming over to country was the fans. It's not what I loved about it is in many ways I don't feel like my show is much different than I would have done in Tupelo. It's a little less like arms crossed tough guy, but it's at its root there's the same energy to it. And I have two of the guys from Tupelo Honey with me still that are playing today. But the fans, what I really noticed is towards the end of Tupelo, it was the sort of the hipster era in Canada was just starting to come in. So people were really cool in the audience all of a sudden and afraid to have fun, which I think has kind of subsided now, what I'm thankful for. But in country, I just felt like no one cared about being cool. They're all there to have fun and to sing along and just have a good time. And the audience was I noticed this right away too. Instead of the audience being like 20 to 27, the audience was 16 to 90. Like it was
Right.
crazy. And they're
And
loyal
sometimes
loyal fans
3 to 90, like
yeah.
you've got those festivals where you've got little kids running around in the front and, sitting on mom and dad's shoulders as they're watching you perform. And then you've got, elderly folks there. It's super cool. Country music festivals are just like such an interesting case study in people watching.
There's
And
so much. There's something for everyone, really. You go to the beer gardens on say like a Big Valley or Dauphin Country Fest or whatever, and it's a much different. It's got that rock and roll kind of vibe to
Yes.
it. But
Yes.
you can find out there's something for everyone in these country festivals, and that's really cool to me as a person that's trying to grow as a songwriter now into my probably wrong side of mid 30s here. It's it's something that I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like this is a genre that I can continue to not have to be a cool 20-year-old sleeping in a van eating pepperoni and chocolate milk all day long.
No,
So
and the great thing about country music is that it is very inclusive, and you're right. Like you can have, you can be a George Strait or an Alan Jackson, 60 years of age, and if you put out the right record, you could still have a hit. But at the very least, you're going to play sold out shows as often as you want to play them. Which is
yeah,
really why we're doing all this. Is why we're putting out content. It's a good reminder for my clients. I'm like, the reason we put out great content is so that you can sell 4,000 to 6,000 tickets or more, obviously. But if we're in
yeah.
the building phases, that's the goal. That's what we're all gunning for. The content is somewhat malleable, right? You can take different creative directions, but as long as you build an audience that's loyal and will reach into their pocket and grab $39 to go see you on a Friday night, then you're killing it.
Yeah, is a great example of that, and I always look up to him is Corb Lund. Like, what an interesting career. He doesn't really have mainstream support, really. He hasn't had a song on commercial country radio forever, but it
Over a
doesn't matter.
decade.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter because he still sells 4,000 tickets in Edmonton for, I don't know, in other markets, but like, and his fans are rabid and they all buy merch and they all just like they're desperate to see what's next for him. And I think,
Yeah, he's created somewhat of a cult following.
yeah, and I love that engagement from fans. And it's always something like, okay, what's my version of that? How do I get there? So
Right.
he's been an interesting model as somebody that has forged his own path. I think that's really cool. But you know what's so funny? Like back to the transition from country to or from rock to country is that Corb is a great example of that too. Like the Smalls were a punk rock band that all my friends thought were super cool in high school, and seeing where he ended up is really interesting. And I'm finding that the more I meet people and get into songwriting situations and stuff, there's a lot of strange connections in this music world that I just love. Like when I was in England over this last summer, I suppose, I was writing with this guy over there, and we were trying to write some country music because there's a few country writers that are really doing some stuff, and this guy named Dan Weller I was working with, and he had this strange connection to the guitar player for Florida Georgia Line, and I was like, oh, that's cool. You have a connection to Nashville and to sort of my world. But the more we got talking, I found out that he had somewhat of a similar experience on a grander scale. He was in like a metal band for years, like a very popular metal band in Europe that used to tour with like Slipknot, and these guys could headline in South Africa, and they'd play in like Malaysia with Slayer and stuff like that. And we just hit it off because we found some parallels between our worlds, and sort of country was the big thing that united us later in life. And now we work together on a lot of stuff. We're working on Clayton Bellamy's record together, and it's just so crazy. That's one thing I just love about the industry, and what I've loved about my journey from rock to country is just finding all these little interconnections with so many people that I've met along the way.
Well, the word authentic is so overused. It's almost a cliche, but the truth of it is it doesn't necessarily align in terms of fidelity with a format. It's deeper than that, right? You're an example of that. Corb Lund is a perfect example of that. Like there's something about Corb, no matter what music he decides to put out, that still resonates, because whether or not it fits on country radio or punk rock radio, it's still coming from the soul. There's something deeper than a format that defines authenticity, right? And it's why certain types of artists can, sort of slide back and forth between genres. It's because whatever it is that's coming out of them, it's real, and people just identify that, and they don't really give a shit what the packaging looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's not always easy to get there. I think it's tough when you're going upstream sometimes, I think, but yeah, super big respect to anybody that finds their way doing their own thing. It's pretty respectable. It pumps me up every time I see it.
So creatively, you've got a lot on the go. You're obviously a committed husband and father, and you've got a lot in your world going on. But when are you going to start the Dan Davidson podcast? Because I think you're a natural, and I think you should do it.
That I thought about it. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like, as I'm sure you know, and I've seen, it's all about consistency, right? So it's making sure you're on it, doing lots of them all the time. So I
You know
think
what the secret is?
what's that?
You know what the secret is in terms of consistency? Don't announce it or start it until you have 6 or 7 in the can.
Right.
That's my recommendation for people. You want to start a podcast, get ahead of it a little bit. As long as you're not.
Are you doing one every day, or when? Like how often are you filming?
No, we're dropping them once a week. So we drop a podcast every Monday. But what I do is I pre-record them like you and I are doing today, and it's November 24th today, 25th, and this is going to air around December 22nd. So I'm building them out so that I'm not in a position where I'm reactive and scrambling for a guest week to week, right? And luckily we're covering subjects that aren't necessarily hot button current events issues. Like we're talking about the music business, which yes, there's some current events in there, but generally we get a little bit of forgiveness from the audience. And I'm a big proponent. Anybody you want to start a podcast, don't talk about it, don't promo it, just get 6 or 7 in the can and then promo the shit out of your first episode and start rolling them out. You'll always be ahead of it.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting world, isn't it? It took me forever to understand the concept of podcasts for some reason. And now I just think it's like, this is amazing. It's AM radio, but on demand and only the stuff that you want to see. So I think that's so cool. Like I'm just so deep into a few podcasts now, and it's really interesting.
What are some of your favorites?
Well, this one I started listening to was that Dax Shepard one, the Armchair Cynic or whatever. He had David Farrier on, that guy who did Dark Tourist and all this stuff, and he had this great take on conspiracy theorists and what drives them, and I thought that was so interesting. So that kind of opened the door for me to dive into the Dax one a little bit, and obviously the Joe Rogan one, Oprah for Men, it's been called. He's got such great guests too. Like it's everything from scientists and crazy people and musicians and fighters, and it's something I don't know. I always
all
find
over the
something
board.
Interesting there. But you know what's actually really cool? There's
what's that?
There was one I was going to tell you about that. So I'm a bit of a history nerd. For some reason, I think it's just really, I don't know. It's really entertaining to me. So there's one I found called Cool Canadian History, and they're just short podcasts. But turns out the guy that does these podcasts, David Boris, I was like, what? How do I know this guy's voice? And I'd written with him in Nashville. He's a songwriter part-time.
No way.
Half of the year he spends as a songwriter, half of the year he spends as a history professor at UBC. So I've dived into this Cool Canadian History thing, crushed 600 episodes of that. So it's pretty cool.
I'm going to get into that one. Well, listen, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. It's always great to connect with you. Congratulations on all your success so far and grinding it out the way you have. And best of luck in the future, brother. And I'm looking forward to that podcast if you ever get it rolling.
All right. You can be the first guest.
Love it. I'm in.
All right, buddy. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks, Dan.
Talk to you later.